Welcome to Pod Save America. I'm Jon Favreau.
I'm Dan Pfeiffer.
Let's get to the news. Thursday was supposed to be the night of the second presidential debate until Donald Trump declined to participate after the commission made it virtual because he contracted COVID. Instead, both candidates held separate town halls. Biden's was moderated by ABC's George Stephanopoulos, and Trump's was moderated by NBC's Savannah Guthrie. First, I want to talk about the controversy over Trump's town hall. A lot of liberals and journalists, including quite a few journalists and staffers at NBC, were upset with the network for rewarding our super spreader president with an event that aired at the same time as Biden's town hall, especially since Trump was the one who pulled out of the second debate and hasn't exactly been forthcoming about his health. Dan, what did you make of that controversy?
Do you know how sometimes in the course of a day spent mostly on Twitter, you just decide there are certain things you don't have the energy to understand? This is one of them. Can you help me understand? Like, what's the argument against it? I'm not saying it's wrong. I just fully...
This is going to be hard for me
had a lot going on
yesterday.
yesterday.
I didn't understand it at all either, but I will give it a whirl.
Okay.
So, Trump throws a temper tantrum. He pulls out of a debate. He hasn't been forthcoming about his health, so you don't know if he's infectious. And so NBC decides to step in and say, okay, well, we'll give you a forum anyway to talk to people, and we'll do it opposite Joe Biden. I'm telling you. I mean, I just want to look at things at this point with, just over 2 weeks left until the election from a purely political standpoint. What is going to help Joe Biden win? That's literally all I fucking care about right now. Okay. And having Trump speak to voters on national television for 60 minutes is probably going to help Joe Biden win.
Yeah.
That was all that was going through my mind. More Trump, as we have been saying for years now, is never a good thing when it comes to undecided voters, swing voters, voters on the margins. I'm not talking about his base. If Trump wins this election, it's because his base was fired up and he got even more Trump voters out there registered, and that's how it happened. It's not because he convinced them during this fucking town hall.
Well, I think that there is probably a lesson in this, and it's a reminder, which is, how do you feel about your cable company?
Well, I've cut the cord. Now we just have...
right. Everyone hates their cable company. A cable company owns NBC, right? Ultimately, and this is not about the journalists at NBC. This is about how business decisions are made. And we constantly want large media companies owned by even larger for-profit corporations to do the quote-unquote right thing. They are businesses. They are always going to do what is best for business. And that is what happened here. Yes, it is unfair to reward. I've now figured out why people are mad about this. It is unfair to reward Trump for basically lying to the debate commission, getting COVID, spreading it to everyone, backing out of the debate, and then rewarding him for that ridiculous behavior with this town hall. But NBC is a business, and they are in it to make money, and they want ratings, and they want to sell ads, and that is what they are doing here.
And look,
right or wrong, this is always going to happen.
And I will say this: I get it. We have a couple weeks to go. Everyone is very anxious. Everyone is very worried. Nerves are frayed. I am there too. And people anything that seems like it could shake up the race worries people. People want to do something. I would just say to everyone, you got to focus on what's going to get Joe Biden to 270, right?
And I know what that is now.
It is not boycotting an NBC town hall, folks. It's just not.
No, you know what it is?
It's not that.
I think after last night, what it is we should take all the energy that went into boycotting the NBC town hall and use it to pressure CBS to give Trump a 2-hour town hall. Right after a football game.
That's something that could get Joe Biden closer to 270.
That's my point.
Yeah,
that's my point.
But I was saying, if this stuff like this is going to happen in the next 2 weeks, when it happens, go to the phone bank, go to the text bank, talk to people about Joe Biden, what he stands for. That is the most productive use of our time at this point. Make sure that people in your life who might not vote, go vote. How do you think Savannah did as a moderator?
Fabulous.
Honestly,
she was great.
I think it was one of the best Trump interviews that I have ever seen. And I say interview because, she did have to make room at some point for voters to ask questions, but she decided in that town hall early on that she was going to treat at least the beginning like a straight interview.
We sort of, because it's been a number of years now, Savannah is often thought of, she's the host of the Today Show. It's a morning show. She's often interviewing movie stars and celebrities in addition to politicians. But before that, She was a White House correspondent. Every single morning for the years that Savannah was the White House correspondent, she would call me at like 6:30 in the morning because she would had to do a morning Joe hit as part of her job. Sorry, Savannah, I'm glad you graduated from that. And would kick my ass every morning, right? Like, she is smart as can be. She is a lawyer by training, incredibly talented. And she approached this like every interview with Trump should be approached. And she knew her facts. She did not back down. She held him to account. She did not let him just vomit verbal applesauce onto the stage and move on to the next thing. She did a phenomenal job. Like, we were biased. We were friends of hers. She's, I think, was the second ever guest on a podcast that we've done together.
That's right.
But she was a superstar last night, and it was awesome to see.
Well, and like you said, yeah, we've known Savannah a long time. I've always been a big fan. She's a friend. But I will say the other thing that made it so good and what makes Savannah such a good journalist and why the Today Show host role is such a good fit for her is she's just very normal and down to earth. And she approached the interview like a human being at home who's skeptical of this lunatic president, asking him questions, right? She was nice. She asked very piercing questions in a very congenial tone. And she followed up very sharply, still maintaining that very congenial tone and smiling the whole time at him, right? Like, she did not go super hard at him. She was not playing for the cameras. She was not, like some of the people who interview Trump do. She just was like, she stuck on one question, followed up when he lied. She stayed there. She didn't leave. And she kept following up until he finally answered the question, which a lot of times he didn't. And he just dissembled. Because as every interview with Trump that has gone really poorly for Trump, it's because the interviewer in question does not let him move on to the next topic, and they don't move on to the next topic. They just keep following up on his lies and on him just babbling until he finally says something.
I mean, it's an interesting thing, which is reporters go, we've seen this in interviews with more normal presidents, like the one we work for, reporters go into it and there's like, I know I have 20 minutes or 30 minutes and I have to get to these 7 things. And so when the president doesn't answer the question on the first or even the second try, you move on. And what I thought was really good about Savannah, and I think Jonathan Swan did this, and Chris Wallace and the other sort of good interviews that Trump has done recently, or good performances by interviewers with Trump, is they've been willing to cover less topics to try to get answers on some of them. And I thought that's the right way to do it. Because I watched the Biden interview in real time and the Trump interview afterwards, and I was shocked by how short the Trump one felt and how few topics they actually got to. But by that approach, you actually forced his hand to try to answer some of them. And I thought it was very fruitful for viewers trying to understand more about who this lunatic is.
Now, the early ratings out say that Biden's town hall was narrowly more popular than Trump's, although we should note that there's a few cable networks that NBC owns, like MSNBC, Telemundo, that are still out there. So as the ratings come in today, Trump could pull ahead. But at the very least, it seems like they're roughly similar. And one of the fears about this town hall was that Trump would swamp Biden in the ratings, which, I have to say again, I kind of wish more people watched Trump's town hall.
Super Bowl ratings for Trump is what we want. Beam it into the cortex of the American people.
Yeah. I'm hoping as the ratings come in, it's more ratings for Trump. That's what I'm hoping.
That's right. I think it is ratings are like a pretty imperfect metric of enthusiasm. Like, it is exciting that this many people chose Biden over Trump. I think that is a good sign. I think it speaks to enthusiasm among his supporters. It probably even speaks to some swing voters who probably think they know all they need to know about Trump, but want to check out the other guy. And so I think that's all positive. But in general, we want the American people seeing Trump speak, because that is bad for him.
All right, let's talk about some of the notable moments. Savannah kicked off the night by trying to pin down Trump on the timeline of his COVID infection. A little bit later, she and one of the voters pressed Trump on whether he's now changed his mind on the importance of masks. Let's take a listen to both of those interactions.
When was your last negative test? When did you last remember having a negative test?
Well, I test quite a bit, and I can tell you that before the debate, which I thought it was a very good debate, and I felt fantastically. I had no problem before.
Did you test the day of the debate?
I don't know. I don't even remember. I test all the time. But I can tell you this. After the debate, I guess a day or so, I think it was Thursday evening, maybe even late Thursday evening, I tested positive. That's when I first found out
Well,
about
back
it.
to the debate, because the debate commission's rules, it was the honor system, would be that you would come with a negative test. You say you don't know if you got a test on the day of the
I
debate?
had no problem. Again, the doctors do it. I don't ask them. I test all the time, and they.
Did you take a test, though, on the day of the debate?
You know, if you ask the doctor, they'll give you a perfect answer.
Yeah.
But they take a test, and I leave, and I go about my business.
Did you take a test on the day of the debate, I guess is the bottom line.
I probably did, and I took a test the day before and the day before, and I was always in great shape. And I was in great shape for the debate, and it was only after the debate, like a period of time after the debate, that I said, that's interesting, and they took a test, and it tested positive.
So just to button it up, do you take a test every single day?
No, but I take a lot of tests.
Okay, and you don't know if you took a test the day of the debate?
Possibly I did, possibly I didn't.
And here's the mask one.
As far as the mask is concerned, I'm good with masks. I'm okay with masks. I tell people wear masks. But just the other day, they came out with a statement that 85% of the people that wear masks catch it. So, you know,
They
this
didn't
is
say
a
that.
very
I know that
tricky-
study.
Well, that's what I heard, and that's what I saw. And regardless, but everybody's tested, and they're tested often. And I also knew that, hey, I'm president. I have to see people. I can't be in a basement. I can't be in a room. I have to be out.
You can see
And I
people with a
also
mask,
know-
though, right?
I can, but people with masks are catching it all the time.
Has your opinion changed on the importance of mask wearing?
No, because I was okay with the masks. I was good with it, but I've heard many different stories on masks. I mean, I had, being president, you have people, they bring meals, they bring this, and I had an instance recently where a very wonderful person is bringing me a meal, and he's playing with his mask, and he's touching his mask all over the place, and then he's bringing a plate in, and I'm saying, well, I don't know if that's so good. I mean, the good news, I didn't eat it, okay? I decided not to eat it. This was a month ago. But look, you have on the masks, you have two stories. You have a story where they want, a story where they don't want. I am all for it.
I don't get that, because it's just all of your public health officials, your administration, they're in unison about this.
It seems to me from these answers that the president didn't get tested right before the debate, was probably infectious at the debate, does have some kind of lung damage. He said later, they said the lungs are a little bit different, a little bit perhaps infected, when Savannah was asking him about that. And he clearly hasn't learned a thing from his illness. What about you? What was your takeaway there?
I mean, the testing thing is a gigantic issue with this debate coming up next week. How is the debate commission going to change its honor system for ensuring that the next president of the United States may not catch COVID? Right? Like, how are they going to change that? Like, I don't know if you have gotten a COVID test, you know anyone who has, but they stick a Q-tip very far up your nose. You would remember when it happened, right? The debate's a memorable day in a 7-day week.
I mean,
you would remember.
I've gotten a COVID test up the nose. I've gotten one of the finger prick ones, which I know is what they have at the White House, some of the rapid ones. No matter what it is, you remember getting a fucking COVID test. Of course he knows the COVID test. It's obvious. It is obvious what happened, that the last time he probably got a COVID test was Saturday, the day of the Amy Coney Barrett super spreader event. And then the White House just told the debate commission that COVID test was still valid, even though clearly he caught COVID in between that event, or at that event, and the debate.
Or he had it before, because the White House rapid tests are the same rapid tests you see the NFL using. And if you track the NFL very closely, it is constant. Like, this team has 4 positive tests, and then the next day they do the PCR test and they don't have them, or vice versa. That is not a reliable enough measure. And I am convinced, based on nothing. So file this into conspiracy theory if you want. But my personal conspiracy theory is that Trump, remember when the first time he ever got the test and he complained for like 30 minutes about the pain in his nose and how far it went up there? I am convinced that he refuses to take the PCR test.
Oh, yeah, because he doesn't want it up the... But I think you can take the PCR test not up the nose, too. I think they can do it other ways.
If that is the case, then my conspiracy theory has collapsed faster
Though
than QAnon.
I was going to say, I will say, the first time I got a COVID test was the PCR test up the nose, and I was like, oh, God, this is going to be awful. I don't love medical things. And then it happened, and I was like, that is like minorly uncomfortable, but it wasn't bad at all. And the nurse who gave it to me, she was like, yeah, the president went on TV and said that it was a horrible test, and now people are worried about it. He's never helpful on anything that he does. Nothing he ever does is helpful.
Get that lady into town hall.
Yeah, this random nurse just complaining about the president unprompted. I also think on the mask issue, like, this is...
It's
like,
insane.
This young woman The young woman who asked the question is a frontline healthcare worker. She was undecided, I think maybe leaning Biden. I think her mom was leaning Trump. They both asked questions together. But, like, have you changed your mind on masks? Here's what Chris Christie, who spent 4 days in the ICU, said yesterday, and he's been saying it again today. He said, I was wrong. People should wear masks. And then he talked about Trump's answer last night and said he should not have just said it's okay to wear masks. He should have encouraged people to wear masks, and he should have encouraged people to social distance, because I didn't do either of those things, and I ended up in the ICU for 4 days. Chris Christie, is someone who, like, faced death because of COVID and said, you know what, I was a fucking idiot. I learned a lesson. People should wear masks. Like, if Trump had just said that, even on that one issue, like, it would have made me nervous, because I actually think it would have helped him politically a little bit.
The whole thing was a layup that he threw over the backboard.
Layup!
But, like, here is an 80% issue with no political downside at all. Mr. President, would you like to support it here with no pushback? Yeah, absolutely not. He just, like,
more than half of his base, more than half of the Republican Party is in favor of everyone wearing masks.
I mean, and he even, like, he clearly was instructed by his now COVID immune staff to endorse masks, because he kind of half did it several times. He said, Savannah, you and I are on the same side of masks. I'm fine with masks, but he can't actually get himself in that position, because then he would say he's for them, and then he would spend the next 5 minutes undermining that point by talking about this fake study of 85% and telling that very weird story about the person fingering their mask. He cannot bring himself to do the most obvious thing he could do to help himself, because anything that suggests that COVID is serious reminds him of his absolute historic, pathetic failure to protect the American people. Like, COVID is this interesting mirror that it forces Trump to look at himself and see himself as the absolute failure that he has always, I think, probably known down deep that he really was, and so that's why he can't, not to psychoanalyze him, that's why he can't bring himself to just admit he was wrong on one thing or adopt the most obvious safe things. He can't do that because it reminds him that he's screwed up and he is not who he likes people to think he is.
I mean, it's not just COVID, though. He's literally never been able to say he was wrong on anything his entire life.
Yes, this is true.
It is his one consistent theory of politics: never admit you're wrong, never admit a mistake, never say you're sorry, ever, no matter what. And by the way, saying, like, it's okay if you wear a mask, that's not the fucking point of masks. Like, masks don't work if it's just a choice and you can wear one if you want and you don't have to, like, that's not how masks work. The masks are effective if everyone wears a fucking mask. Unbelievable that we're still saying that now. Anyway, because Trump is the nation's most famous conspiracy theorist, Savannah had to spend some time on a few of the nuttier things he's tweeted recently. She asked if he would disavow QAnon, which the FBI, Trump's FBI, has called a domestic terror threat. Trump declined. She then asked why he tweeted a ludicrous conspiracy that Barack Obama and Joe Biden had SEAL Team 6 killed, the members of which are very much alive. He didn't have a great answer for that either. Let's listen to both clips.
Let me ask you about QAnon. It is this theory that Democrats are a satanic pedophile ring and that you are the savior of that. Now, can you just once and for all state that that is completely not true, and that disavow QAnon in its entirety?
I know nothing about QAnon.
I just told you.
I know very little. You told me, but what you tell me doesn't necessarily make it fact. I hate to say that. I know nothing about it. I do know they are very much against pedophilia. They fight it very hard, but I know nothing about it.
They believe it is a satanic cult run by the deep
study
state.
The subject. I'll tell you what I do know about. I know about Antifa, and I know about the radical left, and I know how violent they are and how vicious they are, and I know how they're burning down cities run by Democrats, not run by Republicans.
Republican Senator Ben Sasse said, quote, QAnon is nuts, and real leaders call conspiracy theories conspiracy theories.
He may be
Why
right.
not just say it's crazy and not true?
He may be right. I just don't know about QAnon.
You do know. Just this week, you retweeted to your 87 million followers a conspiracy theory that Joe Biden orchestrated to have SEAL Team 6, the Navy SEAL Team 6, killed to cover up the fake death of bin Laden. Now, why would you send a lie like that to your followers? You retweeted
That was a retweet. That was an opinion of somebody, and that was a retweet. I'll put it out there. People can decide for themselves.
You're
I don't
the
take a
president.
position.
You're not like someone's crazy uncle who can just retweet whatever.
That was a retweet, and I do a lot of retweets. And frankly, because the media is so fake and so corrupt, if I didn't have social media, I don't call it Twitter, I call it social media, I wouldn't be able to get the word out.
Retweets are not endorsements. That's true. It's true.
I mean, that is true. That is true.
I mean, Savannah saying that you're not somebody's crazy uncle was, to me, basically sums up Trump and the whole entire race, right? Like that, yes, no, he actually, a lot of voters right now, hopefully a majority of voters in states that had up to 270, see him as America's crazy fucking uncle, retweeting crazy shit like this. Like, that is, I'm so glad she brought that up. I was hoping she would bring that up because, like, we are so inured to Donald Trump's craziness on Twitter that I didn't even realize until a day later when someone pointed it out on Twitter that he had retweeted this conspiracy about Obama and bin Laden and SEAL Team 6 and all this bullshit. And a whole bunch of reporters didn't even write about it until a day later. And suddenly everyone remembered that he had done that because he tweeted so many crazy things in a row. But like the idea that you're the president of the United States and you would just promote a conspiracy theory that your predecessor and your political opponent had the people who killed bin Laden killed, and that bin Laden, I mean, what the fuck is he doing?
I mean, the crazy uncle was the exact right way to describe Trump because, we talk about this a lot. But if anyone in your family, it would most likely be your uncle, said the things Trump said, posted the things Trump's posted on social media, there would be a family meeting about it, right? And hopefully that's what this election is like America's family meeting about the crazy uncle that we have to do something about. I mean, the conspiracy theory in this case is insane. Like, it is, as I understand it, the Bush and Obama administrations colluded together to keep bin Laden alive in Iran and to then bring him.
It's not even worth it.
I mean, it's so crazy. And it is why ultimately having Trump have to face the public and speak in public is politically good for Democrats because it prevents people from tuning it out. It prevents the media from sort of sanitizing and trying to take the crazy things he says and fit it into a traditional framework of how a president acts. And it is just all of the craziness, all the stupidity, all of the narcissism, all of the meanness on display for the whole country to watch. And that is what happened in this answer as well.
Which it normally isn't unless you are paying attention to his Twitter feed all the time, and most of the country's not on Twitter. But like, Brian Stelter pointed this out at CNN, like, Trump usually does interviews and speaks in public in safe spaces, right? He talks to Sean Hannity, he talks to Laura Ingraham, right? He talks to all his friends on Fox, and they will never ask him about these crazy conspiracies and crazy tweets because most of the time they're promoting it on their network as well. And so the rare moments when Donald Trump steps outside of his right-wing MAGA media safe space and actually sits for a real interview, and a reporter calls him on one of the many crazy things he says or tweets on a daily basis, he falls apart. And the whole country gets to see that. I mean, like, how do you think both of those things play with people who are just hearing about these conspiracies for the first time? I would imagine that a lot of voters, a lot of people who are just tuning into town halls who aren't sort of political junkies might not have never heard about QAnon themselves. They probably certainly haven't heard about that crazy conspiracy about SEAL Team 6. Like, what does that seem like to people? Do they just see it? Do you think they see it as noise? Do you think they see it as, something's a little wrong with this guy?
I think to the extent that if people dig into any of it, to what QAnon is or what this conspiracy is, they're going to be deeply, deeply, deeply concerned about what is going on in this country. I think for someone who was sort of surfing the news, maybe didn't tune in this town hall, but saw a clip of that on social media or heard about it from someone, it is a reminder to these voters that Trump is focused on everything but the most important issue facing the country, right? 216,000 people have died in the last few months. 8 million people, we learned the other day, have slid into poverty in the last few months. And Donald Trump is retweeting conspiracy theories, defending QAnon. He's not focused on the thing that matters. And that is, I think, ultimately been Trump's undoing this whole campaign, is his inability to understand the moment we are living in and offer a message and agenda that deals with that. Instead, he is off just dealing with the craziest things in the darkest corners of the Fox News expanded universe. And that is a place where the overwhelming majority of voters do not live and do not understand. And so it creates a disconnect. And that is very, very dangerous for a politician facing re-election.
And we should say before we move on, like, he didn't just refuse to disavow QAnon there. He basically praised them. He said, well, I know that they're fighting against pedophilia very, very hard, which, Ben Collins at NBC, who's done a lot of reporting on QAnon, very deep reporting, said that's basically as close to an endorsement as QAnon could hope for, and that they are probably rejoicing right now because it was not just, I don't know who they are. It was a wink and a nod to a conspiracy cult that, again, the FBI, Trump's FBI director that he appointed, have called a domestic terror threat. These are not just like loony conspiracists. They are dangerous. They are dangerous people. So I do think Trump was a little bit less of an angry asshole during some of the voter questions in the second half of the town hall. But I think then he had a different problem. Like every time he was asked what he'll do about a certain issue in his second term, he either didn't answer, talked about his first term and his record, or he just made shit up. Like, how much do you think that matters? Because I do think, like, as I was watching him, he sort of calmed down, and because he wasn't screaming at Savannah, he was interacting with voters. And so if you sort of watched it, sort of like squinted, you're like, maybe he sounds a little more normal in the second half, but I don't think he was offering any real answers to folks.
I think he sounded more normal than Trump did in the first half, but I think that is a grand perversion of the word normal. The words he said did not make sense. Like, if you were to read a transcript of that, you would think there was some sort of massive transcription error because it meant nothing, right? The words meant nothing. He had no idea how the healthcare question was just insanely absurd and false.
The best thing that happened on the healthcare question, and again, this was, a credit to Savannah's moderating, is someone asked him about his healthcare plan. He does the whole thing about how Obamacare is awful. The question was like, what are you going to do about healthcare? He had nothing to say about it, yelled about Obamacare for a while, talked about protecting pre-existing conditions, which is a lie. And then Savannah's like, here's the thing. You've been president for 4 years. Republicans controlled both houses of Congress, and you never replaced Obamacare. What happened? And he was like, well, we did replace the individual mandate. She's like, yeah, well, what about the rest of the bill? I thought you were going to give us better health care. He doesn't have a fucking answer on what he's going to do about literally any issue in the second term if he's reelected.
Nick, he only wants to win reelection to
own the libs.
Own the libs and slow down his criminal prosecution at the state level. I mean, deadly. I'm like not kidding about that. But he has no idea what he's doing. And the healthcare answer, it was just a reminder that Trump is a tremendously incoherent liar. Like some of the politicians who were able to survive in 2018 by telling big, huge, massive lies about their support pre-existing conditions, they were deeply dishonest, but they could fool people. Trump's lies make no sense. They're conflicting. The words don't make sense, and I can't imagine any reasonable, truly persuadable voter listened to that or watched that and thought this man has any idea what he's talking about, and is someone who will stand up for men healthcare.
Yeah, I mean, Frank Luntz did a focus group of undecided voters, and by the way, we should say undecided voters, focus groups of undecided voters at this point are probably going to lean a little more Republican the closer we get, because Biden's lead is large enough in the polls and a lot of people have made up their minds. The remaining people, could be a little more.
Yeah, it's probably 7-30 or 80-20 Republican at this point.
Right, and they're still undecided, so it tells you something. But Luntz said that undecided swing state voters said that the more the president spoke last night, the worse he looked. So I don't even there was a lot of commentary on Twitter about this 45-year-old white woman who asked Trump about DACA, and she started the question by saying, you have a really nice smile to the president. And everyone was like, oh, God, she's like a MAGA person. She's a Trump person. This is awful. Afterwards, a reporter caught up with her and asked her who she was voting for, and she said Biden. even though she told Trump he had a nice smile, she's voting for Biden. I mean, do you think he did himself any good at that town hall at all? Is
no.
there anything? I keep trying to say all this stuff. Is there anything we're missing? Anything we're missing on this?
No, you said it right that Trump could still win for a whole host of reasons that have to do with voter suppression. But if he were to win, it is not because of what he said last night. We have spent so much time over the last 4 years talking about how Trump's biggest political problem is his tweeting.
Yeah.
I actually don't think that's true. His biggest political problem is speaking. When people see him speak, he reminds them of everything they hate about him and hate about politics. He is stupid. He is angry. He is pathetic. And he is mean. And none of those are appealing qualities. And they are particularly unappealing in a time of absolute national crisis. Every time he speaks, he looks way too small for the moment we are living in. And so, that's why we said earlier, CBS hosts a town hall. ESPN hosts a town hall. HBO, town hall, right? Give that man as much airtime as he wants.
And the other thing that, we've always said is that he's focused on himself and not focused on everyone else. Right? Everything is about him. Everything goes back to him. He is so self-obsessed. Every question goes back to him. Me, 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 me. I did this. I did this. He feels wounded. He feels upset. It's always about him. It's just exhausting. It's fucking exhausting.
He embodies the contrast message against them, which is why it's a good message. Sometimes you have a message and it come in and you say, this person has gone Washington or they're a creature of special interest, but then they'll be out there when they campaign. They don't seem like that. When you say that Trump is not up to this moment, that he is someone who has not grown in office, he is someone who puts himself first, every time he walks out of the White House, every time he speaks, everything he does reinforces that message. He is incapable of not reinforcing it.
Last question before we move on to Biden's town hall. If you were watching last night's town hall as the Biden debate prep team, was there anything that would help you prepare for the final debate next week? We got to get through one more debate here. One more chance for Trump to really shake things up. Was there anything you noticed about Trump's performance that you would?
I think if you can, this is a foreign policy debate, which I think we should note. So that makes it a little more challenging. Any conversation you can have with Trump on healthcare is a giant winner for Biden. Any conversation, if you can bring it back to masks in any way, anything in the world of coronavirus, where Trump has to talk about it, is bad for him because he cannot say the things that people want him to say. He will not bring himself to do it. But I think the biggest thing, which I think was also the takeaway from the debate, is Biden's just got to kind of ignore Trump on that stage. Correct misstatements about his record, defend himself without being defensive, as I think he did well last time. Don't let him rattle you, and just use the national audience to tell people about your plans, and don't worry about Trump is going to disqualify himself by his mere presence on that stage, and you just go out there and talk to people because you have a captive audience about what you would do as president. Because the contrast of the two men, and we'll talk about this in the context of the town halls, embodies what this race is all about. So just Joe Biden being Joe Biden and letting Trump be Trump is exactly what Joe Biden needs to become president.
I mostly agree with that. I would say I think that Joe Biden needs to continue to keep Trump off balance, because I think if you watch that town hall last night, when Savannah kept pressing him on what his plans were or what he was going to do, or voters did, he gets angry and he dissembles and he looks worse. I am sure Trump advisors are telling him, tune it down, take it down a couple notches on this last debate, right? And I know it is probably impossible for Trump to do. But even if he takes it down a few notches, you could imagine the press grading it as a big win for him, right? And I think that, I think what Biden needs to accomplish is the most important thing: tell people about your plans. People are wondering what Biden stands for. What's he going to do? That's number one. Get out of there with that. But I think Biden needs to continue to press him on what would you do? Why don't you tell people what you would do on healthcare in a second term? Why don't you tell people what you would do to stop COVID right now? Not what you've done, not excuses about the past. Talk about the future. This is a race about the future. What are you going to do? I think he should keep pressing him, because I think the danger is if Biden completely ignores him and Trump sort of takes it down a notch and then spends all of his time either attacking Biden or just dissembling, then Biden could just, it could look like a slightly better performance than the first debate.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think you may have said this in what I remember, although I don't remember the details, to be very good advice for Biden before the first debate. I was doing some research for some debate stuff, and I went back and I watched the moment where Candy Crowley fact-checked Mitt Romney on Benghazi. And there was this moment where Romney is stomping around the stage, and he's sure he has nailed Obama on whether Obama called Benghazi an act of terror. And it's Obama's time to talk. And Obama goes, no, Governor, go ahead, and just lets him walk right into the trap. And there's an opportunity, I think, for Biden to give his time back when Trump can't answer a question about some policy issue or something else, be like, no, Mr. President, please explain your healthcare plan. Go ahead.
Well,
take my time. Right.
And that's important because the Trump campaign has essentially telegraphed in a whole bunch of stories over the last couple of weeks that they are going to tell Trump to let Biden talk more, believing that if Biden talks more, he will just give long-winded answers and he'll commit a gaffe, and that Trump should just hold back and not interrupt him so much. So I do think for that reason that it's important for Biden to let Trump talk a lot, and specifically about second-term plans, because we know it's most important to people watching from home to find out what these two candidates are going to do to improve their lives. That's what people are looking for. And Trump doesn't have a good answer on that. He just didn't come up with a second-term agenda, and you should expose that. All right, let's talk about Joe Biden's town hall, which was quite a different affair in just about every way. I thought CNN captured it best with their story about the two events. Quote, on ABC, Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden was explaining his plan to raise taxes on people making more than $400,000 per year. On NBC, President Donald Trump was equivocating about the existence of a satanic cult of pedophiles. Here's a clip of Joe Biden answering that question on taxes.
So you can raise a lot of money to be able to invest in things that can make your life easier, make you change your standard of living by making sure you have affordable health care, by making sure you're in a situation where you're able to send your kid to school, and if you have a student debt, you can deal with it, making sure that your home, you can pay your mortgage, made in America. If you actually insist that whatever that product is, made in America, including the material that goes into the product, it's estimated we're going to create somewhere between another 4 and 6 million jobs just by doing that. But what's happening now? Under his trade policy, a lot of this is going overseas. You get a benefit from going overseas if you have much of it being made overseas. So if you send it overseas, you get a 10% tax increase on the product. If you make it in America and you bring it back, you get a 10% growth. If you bring back a company and you're going to open up an old facility, you get a 10% tax credit for all you invested. That actually works, George.
So you watched the Biden town hall before the Trump town hall. I did the reverse. What was your overall take on how Biden did?
They did very well. It was just comfortingly normal, right? Biden had tried to answer questions. There were details in those questions. I thought he did a very good job. Some of the answers were better than others, but on the whole, I think it was a very, very good performance. And I find it impossible to imagine that a reasonable, truly persuadable voter could watch both town halls and not feel dramatically more comfortable with Joe Biden in the White House than Donald Trump.
Yeah. I think Biden's answer on masks was also a pretty telling contrast to Trump's answer. Here's the clip on that.
The words of a president matter.
Absolutely.
No matter whether they're good, bad, or indifferent, they matter. And when a president doesn't wear a mask or makes fun of folks like me when I was wearing a mask for a long time, then people say, well, it mustn't be that important. But when a president says, I think this is very important, for example, I walked in here with this mask, but I have one of the N95 masks underneath it. I left it in my dressing room, the room I was in before I got here. And so I think it matters what we say. And we're now learning that children are getting the virus, not with as serious consequences, but there's been no studies done yet on vaccines for children. So there's a long way to go, but we can make progress in the meantime and save lives.
I thought that was a really great answer and quite a contrast from Donald Trump's answers to Savannah. Ezra Klein had a really great take on the night and the whole race that you and I were talking about last night. Specifically on that answer, he wrote, this was again and again Biden's point. The words of the president matter. The behavior of the president matters. The comportment of the president matters. The example of the president matters. Biden talks policy often and reasonably well, but he hasn't been putting on a clinic in wonkery. He's been putting on a clinic in decency, and it matters. It shouldn't. Decency should be table stakes, too unremarkable to mention, but right now it does. What did you think of that?
I thought it was a great piece, and I am often jealous of the way Ezra makes arguments, and his use of the hierarchy of needs as a way to explain this campaign was very, very smart.
Yeah.
And I think it is completely true, and it's just a point Ezra has made throughout the primary as well, and is there are certain things that political obsessives and political professionals like us really value, right? Eloquent rhetoric, policy wonkery, grand theories of political change. Those are the things that drew us to Barack Obama. But it's not really what voters always want, particularly in a time of crisis. And I thought it was a very strong, it was a good argument. I do think it undersells how good a candidate Biden has been in this race. He has been phenomenally disciplined. Everything he does, and I think some of it comes very naturally to him, but everything he does, everything he says, undergirds the argument for why him and why not Trump, right? That entire NBC town hall was all about Trump, right? His retweets, what it meant for him, his grievances with the questions from Savannah, his being incredibly excited because some voter said something nice about his smile. And the Biden event was nothing about Biden. He told stories about his life and his father, which he often does, but it was always grounded in a way of talking about how to help other people. Notably, he stayed afterwards for well over an hour talking to all the voters. I was just very, very, very struck in that town hall by, and maybe this is all of our expectations lowered by living in the Trump era, but just what a tremendous breath of fresh air, having just a good, normal, decent person who wants to do the right thing in office would be for this country. Right? It should be table stakes. Ezra is right, but it is not. And I think Biden can do a lot more than that for sure. But at the bare minimum, he understands that in this campaign better than anyone else, including us, has.
The bar is low, but Trump hasn't crossed it.
Yeah.
Right? And Biden has. I mean, David Axelrod always says that, when an incumbent's up for re-election, the race is about finding out who's going to be the remedy to that incumbent and not the replica, right? People want to look for what they most dislike about the incumbent and who's going to be the remedy for that. And I think when you ask what's wrong with Trump, the largest majority of voters in this country, if you ask them what most people agree is wrong with Trump, they would probably say he's a fucking asshole, right? Like we have as liberals, we have a million things that we'd say is wrong with Trump, right? He's an extremist, he's a racist, he's a xenophobe, he's a sexist, all these things. But the most people in this country, when asked, even some Republicans, even non-voters, even people who don't pay attention to politics, would say, that guy is an asshole. And he is cruel, and his cruelty and his self-absorption has created this level of chaos around him that has hurt all of us in the midst of a once-in-a-generation crisis, right? That is the problem. And Joe Biden's, the genius of his campaign in the general election was to understand that what people want is decency again. They want a lot more than that. I want a lot more than that. I want a whole bunch of great progressive policies to pass. I do. But right now, the more immediate emergency in this country is that we have a man in office who is cruel and nasty and self-absorbed while we are all going through a recession and a pandemic. And he is not fit to do that job. And he has made politics miserable. He has made the country miserable. He's made us feel bad all the time. He's made us feel exhausted. And what Joe Biden did during that debate, during that town hall, a lot of his answers were too long. He rambled through some of them, right? He got way into the weeds on some policies. He didn't hit everything. But he, again and again, every single moment of that town hall, he tried. He tried to show that he was a decent person. He tried to show that he would listen. When there was a young black man who said, why should I, maybe he doesn't like Trump, but why should I vote for you? I was thinking of not voting at all. And a lot of young black men are wondering whether they should vote at all. And Biden gives this very, very long answer about education and criminal justice and stuff like that. And at the end, he's like, was that good? Was that okay? And the voter was like, yeah, I think so. And Biden, sensing that maybe it wasn't enough for him, was like, come find me afterwards. Come find me afterwards and I'll keep talking to you. And that is who Joe Biden is. He is not the perfect candidate. He's not going to be the perfect president, but the guy is fundamentally decent and he is going to fight like hell and really try to be a president for the whole country and really try to work his ass off to make people's lives better. And that came across in that town hall more than anything else. And it is the antithesis of the person that we have in office right now.
Your view, your sort of point about people agreeing Trump is an asshole is, I think, 100% right. And I think that is unanimous agreement. And the disagreement is not whether Trump's an asshole, it's whether he's an asshole for me or whether he's an asshole for himself. And that's the difference between Trump 2016 and Trump 2020. In Trump 2016, his argument was, yeah, I'm an asshole, but I'm going to fight for you. I'm going to use my assholery to benefit you, to stand up against the deep state and the swamp and all of that. And now I'm an asshole who only cares about myself. And you're sick, you've lost relatives, you've lost your job, and I don't care about any of that because I'm more worried about myself. And that is the difference. And campaigns are ultimately the meeting of the person in the moment, right? And the best campaigns are when the true essence of the candidate is what the electorate is thirsting for. That was Obama in 2008 was exactly what they wanted. People wanted hope. They want someone who had stood up against the Iraq War. They want the opposite of George W. Bush. And Joe Biden is, even though he is also a white man in his 70s, is the opposite of Donald Trump. Right? That is like that. The Joe Biden who talked to people for hours after that, who genuinely cared whether he answered the question these people had the courage to ask, is the Joe Biden that we have known for many, many years. And the fact that he gets to be him at his absolute true essence of himself also happens to be the best possible political argument he can make for his election. And that is exactly where you want to find yourself in a campaign.
Yeah, he's not a savior. He's not a fire-breathing populist. He's maybe not, he hasn't been the most progressive person in his whole life, but he is a decent public servant who is trying his best. And that is not what we have in the White House right now. And that is it. And look, it's like you said, no, 40-something% of the country is still going to say, over the next couple of weeks, Donald Trump is an asshole for me. It's just going to happen. But the question is, have enough of them said, you know what? I thought he was an asshole for me, but after 4 years, it doesn't seem like he's done too much for me. Doesn't seem like he's done too much for me. And if enough people say that, that's it. Then that's the election right there. One more development we should talk about before answering a few questions. The Biden campaign announced on Wednesday that Kamala Harris's communications director, a flight attendant on her campaign plane, and a flight attendant on Joe Biden's campaign plane all tested positive for COVID. Harris and Biden have both tested negative and said that they weren't close to the people who were infected and said that they were wearing N95 masks. Meanwhile, Trump continues his super spreader tour of big rallies in the battleground states. How do you think the Biden-Harris campaign handled announcing this news?
Well, first, I just want to send our best wishes out to Liz Allen, who is Kamala Harris's communications director. She's our former coworker from the White House. She is one of the best people you will ever meet in politics. And
yes, she is.
So, we well wishes to her for sure. And I hope everyone listening should offer the same. They handled it exactly the way they've handled everything else. And I wrote about this morning in my newsletter, that it embodies their strategy, which is compare the statement they released, which laid out the timeline, the testing protocols, the precautions the campaign takes on a daily basis to keep Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, their staffs, the reporters covering them, and everyone they come in contact with safe, with how Trump has handled it, right? It exuded responsibility. And that is actually, I think, excellent politics. That is the right way that is the right thing to do politically in this environment, because it's a perfect contrast with our deeply irresponsibly dangerous president. But I think it is the advantage of, they handle it this way because they take this very seriously. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are leaders who understand that modeling good behavior is what leaders do, and good behavior saves lives in a pandemic. And also, it is helpful that Biden has as his advisors a bunch of people who have worked on these issues in real life, in real time, outside the context of campaign, in government, right? Yeah. Whether it's Ron Klain or Tony Blinken and Tom Donilon and Anita Dunn, who was there in the White House during H1N1, who understand how serious leaders treat serious issues like this. And that statement was a statement that would have come from a very highly functioning, transparent White House, not a presidential campaign. It is to their substantive and political credit, in my view.
Yeah, I'm sure that they were all very worried and scared and worried for Liz, as they all should have been. I think that they also thought to themselves, as we announce this news, this is an opportunity for us to show how different we are and how different we're going to react from this White House and how this White House handled that. And they did that very well. I also thought, my next thought was, stay home, everyone. Go back to the basement. That is, it's still the nightmare, right? That over the next 2 weeks, that with all the precautions that all of them are taking, someone could still catch it, including Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, which would be fucking awful.
Yeah, 100%. I think, I was incredibly comforted by reading about all of the steps that they take.
Yeah, Joe Biden telling George Stephanopoulos now he's wearing 2 masks. Trump's on 0 masks. Biden's up to 2 masks. He's got an N95 and then another one on top. That was great.
Do you think if Trump puts on 1 mask, Biden's going to add 2 more masks?
I would. Yeah, I would start wearing them all over my face, head. I would be. If I were Joe Biden should wear a fucking hazmat suit for the last 2 weeks.
I mean, the last thing any campaign wants to do is take one of their 2 principles off the campaign trail with less than 3 weeks to go, right? I mean, that is a big deal for that campaign. Probably the voters of the Biden campaign is most concerned about turning out are the ones who are most likely to be excited by hearing from and seeing Kamala Harris. And so, they could have made an argument to themselves that because of the precautions that we take, we do not have to take Kamala Harris off the trail. We can put in some other mitigating steps. But they erred on the side of caution because that is the right thing to do, and it is also the core message of their campaign, that they are going to do things the right and responsible way because that's how you save lives.
Okay, let's take a few questions. Paul Miller asks, several months ago, it seemed the overall sentiment shared on Pod Save America was that Mayor Pete's appearances on Fox News were, on balance, doing more disservice by giving legitimacy to Fox News than being of benefit by reaching Republican swing voters. Pete's had a few recent, in the last couple of weeks, solid appearances on Fox, which have garnered more eyeballs on Twitter. Do you all still feel as if you'd suggest he not make such appearances?
Well, this is primarily my pet issue, of which I have argued with many people about, and I will just clarify my position. I am wholly agnostic on whether Democrats want to appear for interviews on Fox News, right? Whether you want to do an interview with Bret Baier or Chris Wallace. If I was advising a candidate, I would probably say not worth the time and energy, but I think that is a debate of good faith. My biggest complaint, and the thing that I think is and was and is a mistake, are doing these town halls with Fox that offer them legitimacy as a news organization. And my concern was undermined the efforts done by Media Matters and Sleeping Giants and others to persuade advertisers to walk away from the dangerous white supremacy and climate denialism that pervades Fox. I think Pete did a great job in these interviews. I very much enjoyed watching them. So if he wants to keep doing them for now, an election, or forevermore, I am totally fine with it. I thought he is probably the one, if you had to pick one Democrat you would send to go on Fox, Pete has proven himself to perhaps be that Democrat.
I think he has done a fantastic job over the last couple of weeks. I've always been more conflicted about this question. And look, I fucking hate Fox News. It is my forever wish that a liberal billionaire will buy the network and shut it down. I hope to wipe Fox News off the face of the earth at some point. I helped start a media company. Peacefully, of course, obviously. Yes. I helped start a media company to hopefully someday compete with Fox News and the right-wing media ecosystem. I think it's one of the most, destructive forces in the country. But while it exists, I do think that going on that network as a Democrat, and a Democrat like Pete or other Democrats who can argue really well, and piercing the information bubble of some of the people who watch Fox News is important. And I think, look, the poll, Nate Cohn in the New York Times has done all these polls of the race so far, and Nate pointed out the other day, half of Joe Biden's margin right now, especially in some of these northern battleground states, is due to people who voted for Donald Trump switching and saying now they're going to vote for Joe Biden, or people who voted third party and saying they're going to vote for Joe Biden. There are plenty of people who watch Fox News who have decided that even though they voted for Donald Trump, they're going to now cast a ballot for Joe Biden, which means that persuasion is still possible. And if people's information ecosystem is only Fox News and Ben Shapiro and all this stuff, and every once in a while you can pierce that information bubble and make a case and maybe reach some of them, it's probably worth it. It's not worth spending all your time there. It's not worth sitting there with Sean Hannity and having him scream at you the whole time and not let you talk, right? Pick your battles on Fox. And I totally get your point on the town halls, but I do think it is on balance helpful, just because as we have learned from this election, at least so far in the polls, persuasion is still possible. It's not just about turning out more of our people than their people.
No, I think it is important to talk about the scale of these things before people get too excited about them, which is Brett Baer gets, I don't know, 800,000 viewers.
Very true.
Right.
Very true.
The Venn diagram of persuadable voters and who are watching Brett Baer at the moment in which Pete is on is pretty small. Right. So I think you were exactly right. Persuasion is very important. Piercing the ecosystem is important. Creating moments viral moments that get shared on social, like Pete has done, is a good way of doing that. You're not going to you are spitting in the ocean of white supremacist propaganda if the one of the main strategies for combating it is Democratic politicians doing Fox News interviews, right? There are strategic opportunities for it, but there are limits as well.
The main strategy.
I'm never going to let go of this issue. It is a huge problem for me.
No, look, the main strategy for combating it is crooked media. That's what that is our answer to that. Okay. Raina Thompson from Facebook asks, why do polls vary so much?
Because it's a cruel world.
Well, polling is one part art, one part science, right? And the art part is figuring out what the electorate is going to look like, right? So you poll 500 people, and the 500 people that you randomly poll all happen to be college-educated white voters who live in a city. That's not what the electorate's going to look like, right? So in each sample, the pollster has to figure out, okay, how the sample of people that I talk to, is that reflective of who's going to end up voting on election day? And so some pollsters think maybe I'll get more Democrats than Republicans on election day. Other pollsters think maybe I'll get more Republicans than Democrats. Others like maybe the white vote will be this. The other one might say the white vote will be lower than this and there'll be more black voters. And the way they make all these judgments, look, they're not just picking numbers out of the air. They're looking at party registration. They're looking at party ID. They're looking at how you voted in the past. They're looking at where you live. They're looking at your education level. So there's a number of decisions that each pollster makes about what the electorate's going to look like, what proportion of which demographic is going to be in the final set of people who vote on election day that differs from pollster to pollster. And that's why they all look different. Do you think that's right?
I did. I guess the very tiresome and ridiculous metaphor I'd use is, why doesn't all pizza taste the same, right? Sometimes it's made by good people, sometimes made by bad people, sometimes it's got different ingredients. It is an inexact art and science, which is why, as all of the people named Nate and others say, look at the average of the polls, right? That will hopefully take out some of those fluctuations in methodology and accuracy and competency between the people doing the polls.
Yeah, and look, and of course, the thing that is keeping us up at night, that keeping everyone up at night, is in 2016, the state polls in the northern battleground states were wrong because they largely underestimated the number of non-college educated white voters who were going to show up on election day who happened to be very favorable to Donald Trump. And that is because they didn't reach a lot of those people by phone. And so the question is, are the polls again underestimating the number of non-college whites that are going to show up at the polls? Have pollsters found a way to reach more of those voters this time so that the sample is more reflective of what the electorate is going to be? And we don't know.
Well, we don't know that. We do know that this time around, there's just a lot more state level polling done by traditionally well-qualified pollsters, right? So there was just very few state polls in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, because people at all levels of politics thought those states were not super competitive. And so when you only have 6 polls, it's more likely for it to be off than if you have 36. And so this time around, I don't know whether they're right or wrong, but I do know that we know more than we did last time. And the more polls you have, the more it flattens out the error rate. And
That's right.
we have more information. Whether that information will be right or wrong, we'll find out in 2.5 weeks, John.
We'll see. Last question. David Cummings asked, what does Biden's huge fundraising in September and August mean for his campaign? What can you do with $400+ million in cash on hand?
Run lots of ads. Well, look, ultimately what it does is it gives Biden the capacity to have several well-funded, well-organized paths to 270. Trump is making decisions right now about states he's throwing overboard that he can't win, states that he just has to bet he's going to win based on demographics like Ohio and Iowa. And Biden is able to press his case in Georgia. He's forcing Trump to spend money in Georgia, right? Right as of last week, based on the data from advertising analytics I looked at, The only state that Trump is outspending Biden in that Hillary Clinton won in 2016 was New Hampshire. Right? Biden is outspending Trump in the vast majority of states. Trump is outspending Biden in Georgia, Ohio, Iowa, and maybe Texas. I think that's it. And Biden is pushing everywhere else. So Biden is putting himself in a place where he is able to press his case, put Trump on the defensive, and that is important in any presidential election, but particularly in one happening in a pandemic where you just do not know what the conditions on the ground are going to be in terms of how mail ballots are counted, whether there are errors in which ballots are sent out, whether the coronavirus cases are going to spike in the lead up to Election Day that could impact the ability of people to vote in person. And so the more states that you're able to be competitive in, the better chance you have. And that's ultimately what this gives Biden. It gives him flexibility. It gives his campaign flexibility to pursue as many paths as possible. And Trump is once again trying to draw an inside straight. Now, we get cocky. He drew one last time.
He drew it last time. But, Axios has the story this morning about how, Trump officials and senior campaign officials in the Trump campaign are bracing for a loss, But when you really dig into the piece, Bill Stepien, the campaign manager, they're basically giving up on Wisconsin and Michigan. It looks like they don't think that they can win Wisconsin and Michigan right now. But the path to victory, if they lose Wisconsin and Michigan, is still they win Pennsylvania, they win Florida, they win Arizona, they win North Carolina. And then, of course, the ones the outside shots, Ohio, Iowa, Georgia, they win those too. But that would be now. It would be if they win Pennsylvania, Florida, and Arizona, and the 2nd congressional district in Maine, and then we don't win the 2nd congressional district in Nebraska, then it would be 269, which is fucking nightmare. But if we did win the 2nd congressional district, then Joe Biden would hit 270, and it would be by 1. But so that's how narrow the path is, but still a possible path, right? Like. We have not put Pennsylvania away. Joe Biden has not put Pennsylvania away. He has not put Florida away. He has not put Arizona away, and the Trump campaign knows that, and so they are. That's their inside straight. And like we said, he did it last time, but we'll see.
And
Joe Biden
I would
has $400
say
million. So,
but it's like Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and their campaign work their ass off to raise all that money, grassroots donors, a gazillion events, everything. Just tremendous enthusiasm and support. And then Sheldon Adelson and his wife wrote an $85 million check to Preserve America, a Republican super PAC that is going back up on air in the exact states you mentioned right now as we speak, which is a testament to why we have to absolutely fix our campaign finance system, but it just shows the challenges that Democrats are up against.
That's right. All right. So keep working hard. Everyone have a great weekend, and we will see you next week. I think next week we're going to do Monday, Wednesday, Friday again because we have the, last scheduled debate next Thursday night. Check out this week's episode of Pod Save the World, where Tommy and Ben talk about the Trump administration's troop withdrawal timelines in Afghanistan, why K-pop stars BTS are taking criticism from China, and North Korea's gigantic new missile. Great combo of topics there. Happy 150th episode to our friends at Keep It. Ira, thank you for finally inviting me on the 300th episode. I look forward to that. I'm glad that we're not fighting anymore. I love you all, and I look forward to coming on Keep It in another 150 episodes. So thank you. Our Fuck Gerrymandering Fund has been so successful that we've added some new states, so please donate to help flip state legislatures across the country. Go to votesaveamerica.com/fuckjerry. Super important. And we have, just for you, an exclusive new internal poll from the Doug Jones for Senate campaign that has Jones with a 1-point lead over Republican Tommy Tuberville, 48-47. The October 11th through 14th poll of 801 Alabama voters has Jones up 16 points with independents and 65-23 among voters who've already cast their ballot. Dan, can Doug Jones pull off another miracle in Alabama?
Well, he certainly can, according to this poll. I mean, look, Doug Jones is exactly the right person we want in the United States Senate. He is in politics for all the right reasons. Has a very serious campaign team. Fairbank Maslin, the pollsters that did this poll, are very legitimate. I've worked with them in the past. Joe Trippi, who's a senior advisor, Doug Jones, who you may recall from a recent episode of Campaign Experts React, is a longtime and legendary Democratic consultant. mean, if they say he has a shot, it seems like he has a shot, but he's only going to be able to take advantage of the opportunity he has if he has enough money to do it, which is why we encourage everyone who is looking to help Senator Jones to contribute to his campaign. A final push here, and I think Doug Jones could actually pull off what would be the upset of the entire cycle if he can do this.
Look, polls obviously can be wrong. They can be off. But for those of you who are thinking, oh, it's an internal poll, so maybe it's not right, at least on the Democratic side, you and I have worked on a lot of campaigns, it does not behoove Democratic candidates to come up with fake internal polls because they are making decisions based on those polls. They're trying to figure out where the electorate is. So, if that's where they think the race is, that's where they think the race is. It may be wrong, but that is, it could be a race. And Doug Jones needs our help. DougJones.com to donate. Again, we want as many paths to 51 Senate seats as possible. We have not locked up the Senate yet by any means. So anywhere in the country where there's a Senate race that a few dollars might help a Democrat, I would encourage everyone to donate.